Consciousness is nothing but the curse of existence. Arthur Schopenhauer. Schopenhauer believed that consciousness is a trap. Unlike other animals, we don't just exist. We know we exist. We think about the past. We plan for the future. And in between, we drown in thoughts that we can't silence. The more we try to understand life, the more we realize that it may have no meaning at all. But what if he was right? What if, instead of a gift, consciousness was a mistake of nature? A tragic accident that made us prisoners of our own thoughts. They say that thinking is a privilege, but what if it's exactly the opposite? No other living being carries that weight. No animal fears its own death. No animal wakes up in the middle of the night asking, "What's the point of all this?" But we do. Evolution has given us something that no other creature possesses: the ability to think about our own thoughts. This has made us masters of the planet, but it has also condemned us to unprecedented suffering. Consciousness allows us to create, love, and imagine, but it also forces us to feel fear, doubt, and despair. We were told that this self-awareness was a gift, but what if it was exactly the opposite? What if we're trapped in an illusion, a mental theater where we believe we are the protagonists, but in reality, we are just pieces moved by chance? If this is true, then our search for meaning could be a mistake. Our fears, our decisions, even our idea of freedom, maybe it's all just a trick of the mind. But is there a way out of it? Or are we doomed to carry this burden forever? The answer lies throughout this video. But beware, once you see the truth, you can't go back. Nature doesn't make mistakes. Or does it? For billions of years, life on Earth has followed a simple principle: survival. Every mutation, every adaptation, every new genetic trait had to serve a purpose: to live long enough to reproduce and pass on its genes. This means that every characteristic we see today, from snake venom to chameleon camouflage, was selected because it offered some advantage. But what about consciousness? If evolution is a ruthless game of trial and error, where only the best adapted survive, why was a mechanism as painful as consciousness allowed to exist? After all, unlike the basic instincts that guarantee our survival, consciousness often paralyzes us, distresses us, and makes us question our very existence. What if, instead of an advantage, consciousness was just a genetic accident, a side effect of brains that have become too complex? Imagine a monkey thousands of years ago looking up at the full moon in the sky. He sees the bright light and feels something different. For the first time, he wonders what it is. That was the initial spark, an insignificant moment for the cosmos, but the beginning of a journey that has led us to philosophize, create art, build civilizations, and also to suffer. Because with that spark came something that no other living being possessed: the perception of time. Before that, life was just a continuous flow of present moments. But with consciousness, we were able to anticipate the future, remember the past, imagine possibilities, and that's when the tragedy began. Because perceiving time means perceiving the inevitable: death. No other animal has this curse. No other being looks to the future and feels fear of what is to come. But we do, and that destroys us. By the logic of evolution, something like this should never have come about. Creatures more aware of their own mortality should be more vulnerable, more hesitant, more prone to paralysis by fear. But somehow, humans survived. And not only that, they dominated the planet. Maybe consciousness wasn't a mistake, but an accident that worked. Or maybe we haven't yet reached the time to pay the price for it. Because deep down, nature doesn't care if we're happy. There is no evolutionary mechanism to ensure that our existence is comfortable or pleasant. Evolution doesn't have a goal, it doesn't have a plan, it doesn't care about our suffering, it just takes its course, and we have gone too far. But if consciousness was a mistake, an accident, then what happens when we realize this? How do we live knowing that everything we feel could just be a side effect of a blind process? If consciousness really is a mistake, then we're doomed, because there's no turning back. We've already seen the abyss, and that's when the real suffering begins. Wake up, work, pay bills, sleep, and repeat it all over again the next day. Life goes by like this, and one day you realize that time has slipped away. Dreams were postponed. Opportunities went unnoticed. This happens because no one ever taught you how to see the game of life the right way. But there is another path. If you want to reach the next level, you need to access new knowledge. And that's exactly what you'll find in the White Rabbit Codes. This book will open your eyes to what is really happening. You'll understand why you keep getting stuck in the same cycles, learn how to escape autopilot, and start seeing the opportunities that were always there. And finally, you'll make decisions that truly lead to the life you've always wanted. If you feel ready for this change, the link is in the pinned comment. You'll be surprised at how simple it can be to increase your prosperity. Success is a decision. The choice is yours. Thinking too much is an addiction, and like any addiction, it takes its toll. We've been taught that the ability to think sets us apart from other animals. That reason is a privilege, a gift of evolution. But if that were true, why does thinking exhaust us so much? Why, instead of freeing us, does the mind become a prison? Close your eyes for a moment and try not to think about anything. You can't. Consciousness has no pause button. We are constantly analyzing, remembering, planning, and predicting. And this is the great paradox of the human mind. The tool that should help us live better suffocates us with doubts and infinite possibilities. Jean-Paul Sartre said that man is condemned to be free. But what does that mean? For Sartre, freedom is not a gift. It is a burden. Unlike other animals who follow their instincts without hesitation, we are forced to choose. And that choice comes with a terrible weight. Responsibility. Every decision we make changes our lives. Every path we follow means abandoning all others. What if we're wrong? What if we're wasting our opportunities? This existential anguish is not born of the fear of failure, but of the certainty that we will never be sure. Think of all the decisions you've already made. The course you chose, the job you accepted or turned down, the people who stopped being part of your life. Now imagine all the alternative realities that could have existed. Who would you be today if you had made different choices? How many lives have you lost without even realizing it? This is the dilemma of self-awareness. A wolf doesn't spend sleepless nights wondering if it should have hunted another deer. It simply acts, but we don't. We drown in thoughts that never go anywhere. We try to foresee all the consequences, calculate all the possibilities, and this often paralyzes us. The fear of making a mistake becomes so great that we prefer not to choose. In psychology, this has a name: analysis paralysis. Psychologist Barry Schwartz studied this phenomenon and realized that the more options we have, the harder it is to decide. Faced with infinite possibilities, the brain goes haywire. We get caught between the fear of making a mistake and the fear of losing. In the end, we end up choosing anything, or worse, choosing nothing at all. And what's worse, we think so much about being happy that we forget to be. Happiness for many has become a distant goal, something that is always one step beyond. We create unrealistic expectations, idealize the future, compare ourselves to perfect versions of ourselves that never arrive. But in practice, happiness doesn't work like that. Epicurus already said, "The key to peace is not to have more, but to desire less." But how can we desire less when we are bombarded with the idea that we need to be more, have more, live more? How can we simply exist when our mind insists on reminding us of what we could have been? The movie The Truman Show illustrates this dilemma in a frightening way. Truman, the protagonist, lives in a perfect city, with a perfect life, surrounded by people who seem to love him. But there's a problem. Nothing is real. Everything around him is a theater, a big show designed to entertain him without him realizing it. And when he finally discovers the truth, his life can never be the same again. Now that he knows too much, he can never go back to ignorance. This is exactly the dilemma of human consciousness. Now that we know, we can no longer pretend that we don't know. We can no longer simply live without questioning. We can't turn off our minds, and that destroys us. Thought is supposed to set us free, but in fact it imprisons us. And if there is no way to silence this machine, there is only one question left. Are we slaves to our own mind? Death, contrary to what many people think, is not just an inevitable farewell. It is a constant presence, an invisible weight that we carry on our chests, often without knowing it. From the moment we become aware of our own existence, death begins to haunt us. It is no longer just the end of a biological cycle, but a constant threat to our peace of mind, preventing us from living fully. Why does this happen? Why do we know that we are going to die, and yet continue to try to find meaning in a world that deep down offers no guarantees? Existential philosophy, with its brutally honest approach to the human condition, tells us that the meaning we seek can be an illusion. Jean-Paul Sartre, in his profound reflections, spoke about how the awareness of death makes us take charge of our own lives, but at the same time places us under the unbearable weight of this truth. But what if death was actually the big culprit? Perhaps the constant search for meaning is just a reflection of the fear of our own mortality. Deep down, everything we do is an attempt to deny this fact. We cling to life, our ideas, our loves, and create philosophies, religions, art, and sciences in the hope of finding a purpose to justify the ephemerality of our existence. Here, death becomes not only a constant, but a reflection of the very absurdity of our condition. And that's the paradox. Knowing that we're going to die makes us more alive, more aware, but also more anguished. Every moment of joy, of creation, of pleasure is simultaneously a reminder that all this will be lost. Everything we love, everything we have built, will be consumed by time. Science tells us that we are stardust. And yet, instead of surrendering to the natural rhythm of life, we fight, clinging to what we know, as if our understanding of the universe could protect us from this uncomfortable truth. Death, then, is not just an external threat, but the main force that drives us to live, to create, and paradoxically, to lose ourselves. This is where Albert Camus comes in, a philosopher who lucidly observed the relationship between our consciousness and death. For Camus, the awareness of death is not a condemnation, but an opportunity for resistance. He spoke about the absurdity of human existence, the tension between our search for meaning and the universe that is indifferent to that search. By accepting that life has no transcendental purpose, we can live more authentically, without the constraints of an imposed meaning. The great challenge for him is to accept the absurd, the reality that the universe offers no easy answers to human pain. Camus illustrates this philosophy in his famous myth of Sisyphus, where the hero, condemned to push a stone up a mountain forever, symbolizes the human struggle against futility. Each time Sisyphus reaches the top, his stone rolls back, and he must start again. The greatness of this myth lies in Sisyphus's ability to accept his endless task and find freedom within the struggle itself. For Camus, the true revolt against the absurd is to live lucidly, embracing the meaninglessness of life and paradoxically turning this acceptance into a form of freedom. But in trying to find meaning in life, aren't we just creating more illusions? If death is certain and inevitable, what about everything we do to control our lives? What if in fighting death, we are also fighting something even deeper? Our illusion that we are really free to choose? What if, deep down, the choices we believe we have are nothing more than automatic reactions to a life that is already predestined, as if we were being carried along by an invisible current? Do we really control our destiny? Or are we just following a script we didn't write? Have you ever stopped to think that the decisions we make throughout our lives, the choices we think are ours, may not really be ours? Like a puppet, it seems that we are always pulling the strings of our lives, but deep down, are we really in control? Or are we just reacting to forces we can't see? From childhood, we are taught to believe that we are free. Our culture, our education, and even our religions tell us that freedom is a right, that we have the power to shape our destiny with our choices. You are the master of your destiny, we are told. But is this true? Or is our freedom just an illusion, a story we tell ourselves to make sense of a world that often makes no sense at all? The French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre said that human beings are condemned to be free. But what did he mean by that? For Sartre, freedom is a curse, not a privilege. When we become aware of our freedom, we are simultaneously confronted with total responsibility for our choices. We can no longer blame anyone. There is no longer a destiny or a God to tell us what to do. We are responsible for every decision, and that is terrifying. The anguish that Sartre describes comes not from the fear of failure, but from the very certainty that, with our freedom, we are the only ones to blame for everything that happens. Now, let's think for a moment. How many times have you made a decision and then felt the anguish of not knowing if you had made the right choice? How many times have you found yourself caught between multiple options, trying to predict all the possible outcomes, only to discover that, in the end, the decision didn't have the impact you had imagined? And worse still, how many times have you felt trapped by decisions that seemed to have no choice, as if you had been pushed by a greater force? This is the dilemma that Sartre presents us with. Our freedom is not a blessing, but a prison. The feeling that we can control our lives, make our own choices, is a fantasy that prevents us from seeing the true nature of our existence. What's more, modern science is telling us something that Sartre could not have foreseen in his time. In recent years, neurological and psychological studies have shown that our choices may not be as free as we think. Research such as that by Benjamin Libet, a famous neuroscientist, has shown that our brains start making decisions before we are even aware of them. In a simple experiment, he observed that when we chose a button to press, the brain activity that indicated the choice occurred up to 500 milliseconds before we consciously made the decision. In other words, our brain had already decided before our consciousness realized it. This raises an uncomfortable question. If our conscious mind is not responsible for the choices we make, who or what is really in charge? Are we just watching a show with the illusion that we have control over it? The feeling of freedom may be a construct of our brain, a way of masking the fact that our actions are often just reactions to external stimuli or internal impulses that we don't control. This dilemma is not new. The theory of determinism, defended by philosophers such as Spinoza and even Freud, proposes that all our choices are actually the result of a series of causes and effects that span generations. Everything we do, every step we take, is shaped by factors we don't choose. Our genetics, our upbringing, our environment. And if this is true, then our idea of freedom is nothing more than a fantasy constructed by our conscience. A story we tell ourselves to ease the anguish of knowing that, in reality, we are just pieces in a game we didn't choose to play. Modern life, with its endless options and promise of unlimited freedom, reinforces this illusion. Our smartphones, social networks, and consumer systems make us believe that we can choose everything. But are these choices actually being manipulated, influenced by algorithms, advertising, and social conventions that are beyond our control? We are being guided by invisible forces that shape our decisions, without us being fully aware of it. And here comes the big question. If our choices aren't really our own, what does that mean for our search for meaning? How can we find purpose in a world where the control we believe we have is an illusion? Could it be that, in our search for control and meaning, we're not just trying to fill the void left by the lack of real control? And if control is an illusion, perhaps creation, art, music, literature, is the only way to transcend our powerlessness and give real meaning to the chaos of existence. When life seems meaningless and the anguish of existing seems unbearable, many seek refuge. But where does one find solace in a world where everything seems temporary and irrelevant? Some turn to religion, others to consumerism, but one form of transcendence stands out: creation. When pain and hopelessness are shaped by the human hand, they can be transformed into something beautiful, something that gives us meaning, however temporary. Art, in its purest form, is a cry from the soul that tries with all its might to transform suffering into something meaningful. Van Gogh, with his tortured brushstrokes and intense colors, wasn't just painting landscapes or portraits. He was expressing his own internal struggle, his search for a purpose in a world that was crushing him. Art then becomes a mirror of the human condition, a reflection of our anguish and our hopes, but also a way of dealing with them. But what makes art so powerful? Why, in the midst of suffering, do we find a form of beauty that touches us deeply? Perhaps the answer lies in art's ability to turn the intangible into something visible, to give form to what we can't express with words. In a world where emotions often seem overwhelming and uncontrollable, art allows us to transform this energy into something tangible, something we can look at, feel, and in some way, control. This is where Freud comes in with his theory of sublimation. He proposed that destructive drives and internal conflicts can be redirected into creative activities. Instead of exploding into violence or despair, emotional energy can be channeled into creation, becoming something beautiful and universal. In a sense, art is not just an escape from suffering, but a way of transforming it into something productive, something that transcends individual pain and becomes part of a collective experience. Creation then becomes a form of resistance, a way of affirming life, even in the face of the inevitability of death. But more than a simple consolation, art offers us a form of liberation. It gives us the chance to look at our own demons, and instead of being consumed by them, transform them into something we can share with the world. In every Van Gogh painting, in every Shakespeare verse, we see the human struggle to make sense of a world that seems, at first glance, empty. But it is precisely in this struggle that beauty lies. Not in perfection, but in imperfection, in effort, in the cry of a soul that refuses to succumb to emptiness. And here, perhaps, art shows us something profound about human nature itself. It tells us that, even without control over life, Even in the face of meaninglessness, we are still capable of creating. And in creating, we find a purpose that, although it doesn't free us from death or pain, offers us something more precious, a way of affirming our existence, of leaving our mark on the world, however ephemeral it may be. Art then can be our refuge, not because it takes us away from reality, but because it helps us face it head on. It allows us to create meaning in a world that by definition is full of contradictions. It's a field where we can, for a moment, control the uncontrollable, where pain becomes beauty and creation becomes the only thing we can truly call our own. Is this content making you reflect and sparking new ways of thinking? If so, click the super thanks button just below the video. It's a way to say thank you and help me bring more content like this to those who need to reflect on life. Throughout this video, we talked about the human conscience and how it presents us with existential dilemmas that make us question the meaning of life, control over our destiny, and the inevitable end of our journey. Consciousness, contrary to what many people think, is not just a gift. It is a burden that reminds us all the time of our mortality and the limitations of our existence. But what if, instead of seeing consciousness as a curse, we could see it as our greatest tool for transformation? We are undoubtedly beings immersed in an incessant search for meaning. But what we find along the way are not definitive and easy answers. On the contrary, it is the process of living that allows us to grow, create, learn, and transform. The big mistake we make is not looking for meaning, but believing that it will be given to us. It is not control that we must seek, but the acceptance of uncertainty and action within it. True freedom does not lie in doing everything we want, but in learning to live with what we cannot control. This means taking action in the present, even when the future is uncertain. Art, as we have seen, is not an escape, but a refuge that allows us, for a moment, to transcend pain and create something that gives meaning to the chaos of life. Art teaches us that, even in the face of death, we have the capacity to create and leave a significant mark on the world. So it doesn't matter what we lack or what is impossible to control. What is up to us is action. We can choose how to live, how to react to life's challenges, how to create new realities for ourselves and others around us. The power to transform is in our hands, not because we control the future, but because we can decide how to relate to the present. True strength lies in being able to transform our pain into creation, our anguish into learning, our uncertainty into action. Remember, we are not alone on this journey. Knowledge is the key to true freedom. We can be the masters of our actions, choosing what to do with the awareness we have been given. We can live with courage, knowing that although death is certain, how we live and how we impact others is in our hands. This is the crucial point. Living with awareness does not mean succumbing to the weight of suffering or the anguish of existential emptiness. On the contrary, awareness gives us the power to choose how we react to life. Yes, we can transform our reality, however challenging it may be. Conscience is not a prison sentence, but an open door to action. True freedom does not lie in running away from pain or denying death, but in learning to live with both and still finding the strength to act, create, and transform. Art and creation are not just a way of escaping harsh reality, but a way of affirming it, connecting with the world, and leaving our unique mark on the course of time. Instead of getting caught up in the relentless search for meaning that we may never find, we can choose to create meaning for our life. Now, as it unfolds before us, we can embrace our vulnerability, our uncertainties, and use this as fuel to create something deeper, more impactful and more human. We are not prisoners of fate. We are creators of our own journey, capable of shaping our existence and influencing the lives of those around us. True strength lies in being able, even if we don't have all the answers, to move forward courageously, accepting life's limitations and finding beauty in the struggle. In the end, it doesn't matter what the universe gives us. What matters is what we do with what we have, what we choose to create, what we choose to learn, what we choose to leave as a legacy. That's what really defines our freedom. If you've made it this far, you've already taken a step beyond most people. You're subscribed to the channel, you watch the videos, you reflect on every idea. Now the question is, how far do you want to take this? If you want to take the next step and truly apply this knowledge to your life, the White Rabbit Codes is ready for you. The link is in the pinned comment. Remember, success is a decision. The choice is yours. Count on me and follow the White Rabbit.